Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, which are wonderful. The way it works is you schedule your session, and typically I can get you in within a few days, so there is not a long wait to schedule a session with me. And then we almost always connect over the phone. I tend not to do Zoom angel sessions unless they're really necessary. I prefer working over the phone because it limits the visual stimulus I receive, and it makes it easier for me to connect for the session intuitively. So the sessions take place over the phone. More often than not, I can record the session for you. I say that because sometimes technology is wonky, but hopefully, if you want, I can record it for you. And the session begins with an opening prayer that calls the angels in. It is designed to be a conversation, so I ask you to share with me what you would like to focus upon, and we go from there. I will channel for you. I will bring forward inspiration, love, and encouragement for you, and the intention is to help you connect with your divine guidance. So angel sessions are just lovely, and it is truly my blessing to get to support you in this way. With soul mentoring, I usually ask that you sign up for a 12-week package because soul mentoring is designed to provide ongoing support and encouragement as you move through a time of transition, growth, or healing. I only work with a few people. I usually only have a handful of people I work with for soul mentoring, but if it is something that you're interested in, please feel free to reach out and we can talk about that. And then I also offer a variety of classes. They change all the time. So if you go to my website and sign up for my mailing list, I'll keep you posted. But just so you know, just about every 4 to 6 weeks, I have a new class that is opening. And almost always my classes are intimate, usually not more than 8 people. So we get lots of time together. So there's lots of ways I can support you outside of this podcast. So visit my website whenever you are ready, and I will be glad to keep you posted. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you come into a lovely, loving space of rest. So this podcast is inspired by my love of sleep podcasts. I have been using them for years. And I find that listening to a sleep podcast helps build a bridge from my waking life into that beautiful mystery of sleep. It helps to calm my mind and my thoughts so that there is something I can focus upon. So if you're just starting to try this podcast to help you with sleep, my recommendation is to give it a few nights. It may not work the first time because you're just getting used to the sound and the rhythm of my voice. But give it a few tries, and my hope is it will help put you to sleep within the first 20 or 30 minutes. Each episode is an hour, though, so you have plenty of time. And also, I acknowledge all of you who listen during your waking hours because you enjoy the stories and the company. So however you are guided to use this podcast, you have my blessing. This podcast is not just my voice and the stories and the teachings. It is also infused with waves of angelic love for you. So you're being entertained and kept company while you receive a beautiful infusion of divine love. What could be better? And also, I will say it is early morning here as I record this. I have a little bit of a froggy voice, but I feel just fine. It's just one of those morning voice things. But all is good here underneath the blanket fort. So I am grateful for this opportunity to be with you right now. So I invite you to get comfortable in your body. As I've shared with you before, getting into bed at the end of a day is one of my favorite experiences. I love my life. I have a beautiful waking life that I love very, very much. But there is something that is so tactile and indulgent about crawling into bed at the end of the day, especially right now that it's cooler. My husband and I, we tend to keep the house rather cool, not because we're trying to be frugal, but just because that is our preference. But I start getting chilled towards the later evening, and I get so excited to crawl under all the covers and warm up. It is just a delightful experience. And last night, I actually crawled in bed at 7:30. I thought, I have become that person. 7:30 p.m. I am done. And I crawled underneath all the covers and was just delighted with the experience. So may you love bedtime as much as I do. If you struggle with bedtime, may you come to love bedtime as an indulgence that is delightful. And if for some reason you struggle with bedtime, I am sending you so much love. So cozy on up and snuggle on in whatever way suits you best. Fluff up your pillows, pull up the blankets, let your body settle in and feel the support from your mattress or futon or sofa or wherever you are sleeping. Or if it is the daytime and you're staying awake, you can still just kind of move your body around a little bit and let it get comfortable so that you can receive these beautiful waves of divine, loving energy that are flowing through for you now. So I'm going to take a nice deep breath in with you as we call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. And I am so grateful for this beautiful sanctuary of light that you have created for us all. Angels, I ask that you bring blessings of love to each of our beloveds hearing this message. Please help to ease their burdens to clear their fear and worry and help them come into the beautiful center of their authentic spirit. And dear ones, just take another breath in. And I bring to you the sweet reminder that you are a divine being having a human experience. That there is this brightness that is the truth of you. That you are filled with wisdom and beauty and light. And you are precious in this world. This world is better because you are here. And just take another deep breath in. And imagine or visualize allowing it to be so that the angels are now bringing to you a soft pink light that is filled with divine love that has been calibrated just for you. That the angels are aware of all that is transpiring in your life right now. They know what is in your heart, and they are bringing to you this light to help clear your energy field, to help bring you waves of inspiration, to help bring you healing at the deepest levels of your being. And just take a deep breath in, and this beautiful pink light will expand throughout your home, blessing everyone who is with you. And this light is also rippling out into the world to all of those that you love and to all of those who love you and beyond. This light is expansive, and you need not worry about sending the light. The angels are doing it on your behalf. So just take another deep breath in, allowing waves of relaxation to flow through your body, your beautiful body, and just breathe. Allowing the muscles, the top of your head to relax. Allowing your jaw to loosen. Allowing your neck and shoulders to just let down and release. The angels are going to do some special clearing on your shoulders and your neck. Allowing your shoulders, your arms, and your torso to relax. Sending special blessings of relaxation down your back. Allowing your hips to let go. Allowing this wave of relaxation to move down your thighs, to your calves, down to your feet, to your toes, so that every cell of your body receives this blessing of love. And just breathe. There's nothing you need to do in this moment. Just receive and breathe, and know that you are loved. You are precious. And we are so deeply grateful for this opportunity to honor and love you. Truly, my heart is so full with love in this moment. as the angels and I send you this transmission. And don't worry if you can't feel it. Not all of us feel energy the same way. Just imagine that it is flowing to you. Sometimes the imagination can serve as a gateway to help us receive these frequencies. And I'll breathe with you and continue sending you love. And if you have any prayers or intentions that you wish to share with the angels, we invite you to bring them into your heart now. You do not have to pray formally to them. It can be as simple as, hey, angels, I could use some help here. This moment right before sleep is a wonderful time to pray and set your intentions. So angels, we ask that you help each one of us connect with divine love in ways that are meaningful to us. Angels, I ask that you bring sparks of inspiration to bring more joy and happiness and fulfillment into each one of our lives. Help us come into our brighter tomorrows. Help us to see the beauty in this world. Help us to call forward our beloveds, our friends, our community. Help us bring forward relationships that enrich and inspire us. Help us create full and abundant lives that feel on purpose and joyful. So, dear ones, just take some more nice deep breaths in, allowing your angels to tend to you. They're going to take good care of you, as they always do. And while you rest, I'm going to tell you a story. So the story for this episode is inspired by a prompt the angels brought forward this week. I facilitate a really beautiful group called the Soul Stories Guild that was born from my Power of Your Voice class. And we've been meeting for months now, and each week the angels bring forward a prompt for us to explore. And so we go into our consciousness and into our hearts and into our memories, and we begin to connect the dots to see what stories want to emerge from our lives. And then we share them with each other. And it is simply exquisite to get to be together in this loving, heart-centered group where we share snippets of our lives with each other. It is intimate, it is loving, it is light-filled, and so much more. And just as an aside, if this appeals to you, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk more about it, because I always have new groups and opportunities coming up. So if you love the idea of exploring your gifts as a storyteller, we should talk. But for now, I'm going to share with you the prompt that we worked with yesterday, which is such a sweet prompt. So here's the question. What was your relationship to reading and to books, especially as you were growing up in your younger years? And what is your relationship to reading and to books now? It's such a loving prompt, Each one of us has our own experience with books and reading. And I don't want to assume that you love books. There are many people who grow up with difficulty reading, and perhaps these aren't your best memories. But I'm going to share with you some of mine. So I loved what we got to talk about, and so I'm still surfing the love energy from my time with the Soul Stories Guild, and I'm going to share with you some of my memories and my connection points to books and reading, and perhaps they will help you connect with your own. So I grew up in a house filled with books. Both of my parents were avid readers. Books were treasures in my house. And I don't remember learning to read, so I don't have any specific memories having to do with learning to read, and I don't have any specific memories of being read to at bedtime, although I am certain that happened. But my first real awarenesses of reading and books must have happened around the first or second grade. And my memories are sort of blended together. That's what happens for me. Some people's memories are very specific to each incident. Mine tend to cluster together. So this is what I remember. At some point, a teacher was reading a book to us that did not have pictures. And I thought this was my first grown-up book. And it was either Charlotte's Web or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It was one of those two books. And I remember the story being so enchanting that it was the impetus for me to shift over to reading books without pictures. I think both of those books had little drawings in them, but they weren't picture books, right? They were grown-up books as far as I was concerned. And both of those books were my absolute favorites growing up for different reasons. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? If you've been listening to any episodes of this podcast, you will know that I am food-driven, that almost all of my memories are associated with food. So Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a dream come true. I loved that book. And Charlotte's Web, again, the dream that animals could talk, that animals were sentient in that way. And I absolutely believe that animals communicate and are sentient, but I mean as a child, the fantasy of Charlotte's Web. And I loved that book. And I loved reading as a kid. I loved being able to travel into other experiences. For as long as I can remember, I have been enchanted by daydreams and my imagination. That there was this whole inner world that happened outside of the physical world, one. And so books transported me to other places, and I got to imagine them, and I got to be immersed in them. And I've always loved anything that gives me that opportunity to go into those dreamy spaces. And the other thing I was thinking about when I was contemplating my love of reading as a kid. So when I grew up, TV was much more limited than it is today. We had 4 or 5 channels. They were broadcast channels, and that was it. There was no VCR. And so you watched what was on. And if nothing was on, you did something else. Nowadays we go to the phone, we go to the tablet. There's never an absence of something to watch if that is the desire. But as a kid, that was not the truth. There were long expanses of time when there was nothing on television, or maybe my parents were watching something I didn't want to watch, or I think about the long expanses of the Saturday and Sunday afternoons when many of the TV stations would play bad movies that I didn't want to watch, and so I would read. So I really, in hindsight, I can see how not having access to 24/7 television encouraged my habits as a reader. I loved books, and I loved reading, and I loved that it was mine, right? It's like when you're watching a TV show with your family, that show, everybody's experiencing it. But I loved having my secret, sacred world when I would read a book and that book was mine. I don't mean that the possession of the book was mine. I mean the experience of the book was all mine. The pacing, how much I wanted to read, and I would devour books all the time. Like I binged on books. I loved them. And of course, I think when we were in first grade, we got to get our library card, which was a really big deal. I was fascinated with librarians. I had an aunt. I actually had two aunts that were librarians. I said one because one worked at the Skokie Public Library, which was the library I went to. And my other aunt was a law librarian. She was at Yale and then she was at Stanford. So yes, she was a librarian, but I didn't really have occasion to partake in her librarian prowess. So our library was the Skokie Public Library, and this was before computers. So when you went to check out a book, there were usually 2 pieces of paper in an envelope that was pasted to the inside of the book, and the librarian would take out one of the pieces of paper and put your number, your library card number on it, and then she would take the date stamper, which I was fascinated by, and she would stamp the return date onto the piece of paper in the book. I don't know why that whole process fascinated me, and when you came up with a big stack of books, she was so efficient, and I use the pronoun she because it was always a woman back in the day when I used to go to the library, and it would be this, I can hear it in my head, right? Stamp, plop, stamp, plop, stamp, plop. And sometimes you would have a book that had a due date that was quicker than whatever it was, the 3 weeks, and she would have to change the date on the stamper. And I would watch her roll the number back, plop, stamp. I don't know why. That is just in my memory bank. And then we got to take our library books home. I loved libraries as a kid. They just were a wonderland to me. And then, of course, you had to return the books, but then you got to get more books, and you had to pay the late fee if your book was late, which was not a lot of money, like a penny, couple pennies, a nickel, or something like that. Our library also had a bookmobile. I don't know how many of you got to grow up with a bookmobile, but it was this big, like van bus sort of thing, and there were certain days and times that it would come to our neighborhood, and it was a half a block away from where we lived on the next street over. And so we would get to go, and it had a much more limited selection, but you could always find something at the bookmobile. And I can remember stepping on, they had these stairs that would come down off the bus, and I can remember how the bookmobile would kind of shudder as each person got on. But I loved going to the bookmobile and seeing what I could find to read. And then I also remember the Scholastic Book Fair, which here in the U.S., I think all of us grew up with. I don't know how it was in other countries. So usually what would happen with the Scholastic Book Fair is we would get a pamphlet of all the different books that would be for sale through the school, and you would take it home and go over it with your parents and figure out what books you would buy. And then book delivery day was always a big thing because there would be the stacks of books and each person would have their own stack. And you look and see what your friends got and what you got, and then you'd go home and you'd have all of these books to read. You know, this is way before the days of Amazon. So getting to get books was very exciting. So I remember being immersed in books and loving them, you know, on Saturdays or Sundays after we got back from Sabbath school, which was the Jewish version of Sunday school, but we went on Saturdays. We would often go to Leon's Delicatessen, which was in Skokie. It was a very small deli, but had amazing food. And it was takeout. You couldn't actually eat it at Leon's. It was more of a corner store, but he also served deli. So you'd always get it to go home. And he had Kaiser rolls and onion rolls and salami and the best tuna fish ever. And so my parents would get a bunch of, you know, cold cuts and Kaiser rolls and tuna fish, whatever it was. We'd have a feast. And I would remember I would come home and I would make my plate of whatever I was going to have from our feast. And I would sit at the kitchen table and read. That was like my favorite thing, again, because food got blended in with the books. I could do books and feasting at the same time because that was allowed in my house. I don't remember anybody else sitting at the table, so maybe for some reason I was eating lunch on my own. I think I really liked that because I could then read. And we read at the table all the time. Every single morning, my parents would get the newspapers, and it would be the cup of coffee and whatever they were having for breakfast in the newspaper. So we definitely grew up reading. And so I just have this vision of getting Leon's Deli and sitting there for an hour and a half, noshing and reading when I was younger, and I loved it. The other thing I learned early on, and it's not something I do anymore, was I loved reading in the bathtub. I don't know how that got started, but I was pretty young. I don't mean like 5. I mean probably, 11 or 12 years old. And I would love to get in the bathtub with books. And I remember my mom would, shout up the stairs because the bathtub was on the second floor. She would be like, "Laurel, are you okay?" Because I would be in there for so long. And I'd have to yell back, "Yeah, I'm good." I think anything that allowed me to escape. Escape sounds like such a dark word in this context, and I don't mean it. My life was good. It wasn't that I had to escape from anything that was terribly dark. I just loved getting lost in the dreamy place in between, I loved that space where there were characters and different experiences, and I just have always loved that experience of daydreaming and traveling within my consciousness. Not such a fan of traveling in physical world reality, but I love traveling in consciousness. So at some point, I think in my later teen years, I segued into books like Scruples by Judith Krantz. Does anyone else remember that book? I just remember that it was sort of a naughty book. You know, it was sort of a little sexy and risque. I'm sure it would not be considered that now. And it was about Hollywood. I just remember there was the photographer, and his name was Spider, and he was played by Barry Bostwick in the made-for-TV movie. And Lindsay Wagner played the lead, but I don't remember her character's name. But I remember, falling in love with all the Judith Krantz books because they were Hollywood, right? They were about the beautiful, wealthy people. I guess they were our versions of the Kardashians, but they weren't real people. So I loved all the Judith Krantz stuff, and I remember reading Thornbirds, which was a big deal back then, a gorgeous book. And then I remember being really disappointed by the made-for-TV movie when it came out. I loved the first part when Maggie was a little girl played by Sydney Penny, but I really had a hard time with it when they aged Maggie. I think that was her name, right? Maggie? Okay, I may be getting it wrong. If I am messing that up, I apologize, because it has been probably 40 years since I have given Thornbirds any thought at all. But I loved that book. It was very dramatic and sweeping, and of course took me somewhere different than Skokie, Illinois, which was a win in my book. I just was always looking to get out of Skokie for some reason. I wanted to live a big, exciting, adventurous life, and I got to do that through the books. And as I said, my parents' home was filled with books. So downstairs in the basement, there were bookshelves just filled with so many kinds of books. My parents read some fiction, but mostly nonfiction, which I find amazing, because I don't know that I have it in me to read political books or biographies. I just find them a little harder to read these days. But my mom introduced me to the books of Irving Stone. So The Agony and the Ecstasy, which is it's sort of a fictional account, but also biographical, of Michelangelo. And then Lust for Life, which is the same, but for Vincent van Gogh. And those were the kinds of books my mom liked to read, and if they were going to be fiction. So my mom turned me on to the Irving Stone books, which I loved. She and my dad also would read the David McCullough books. I think that's his name. He writes books about Truman and other political figures. My father loved the John le Carre books, so the spy books my dad loved. And my dad also studied Jewish mysticism once he retired. We have a journal that was my great-grandfather's that my sister had translated for my dad, and reading through some of his grandfather's journals got my father interested in Jewish mysticism. So we had fascinating books all the time around our house. My parents loved to go to the Brandeis Book Fair. So Brandeis University or Brandeis College, I don't know if it's a college or university, my apologies, is a Jewish school. And every year they would have a big used book sale that I think it would be in the Old Orchard Shopping Center parking lot. I seem to recall. It may have been elsewhere at some point. And they would have these big tents set up. And my parents looked forward to that all year. And they would come back with so many books, and they would be so excited about what they found. And at that point, I didn't have a love for used books, and there was not a huge used book market like there is these days. For instance, I don't think Crown books happened until the late 70s or early 80s. So being able to buy books at discounted rates wasn't really a thing back then. And I don't recall there being lots of opportunities to buy used books. My parents weren't into thrifting or anything like that, but the Brandeis book sale was an annual event that they would get really excited about. And little did they know that at some point I would become obsessed with used book sales as well as I am presently. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. In my adult years, if I were trying to sort of maintain my reputation as a, spiritual teacher, I would tell you about all the beautiful spiritual books that I have read, which I have read many. But I'm also an earth girl, right? You know that, right? We talk about my love of food and of television, and I love the earth plane. And so I will tell you that in my adult years, I have become a lover of paranormal romance books. And it cracks me up. It cracks me up that I love them. And I have to tell you how I got turned on to them. So, after my husband and I purchased the house we live in now, I share a little bit about this in one of the recent episodes. We got a roommate for our apartment in Los Angeles, and our friend Claire moved in with us, and Claire's awesome. And we came home one day from USM, I think, and Claire was on the couch, and she almost could not look up from this book she was reading. And so, we're just being nice. We're like, hi, how are you? She's like, oh my God, I can't talk. Hold on. And then she hands me this book. She goes, this series. You have to read this series. And they were the Twilight books. And I think she was on the second one, and she handed me the first one. And I was like, okay. And I don't know that I knew anything about Twilight at that point. It was sort of a phenomenon, but not quite yet, because social media was not the beast that it is right now. And so I started reading the Twilight books, and I was hooked. I remember at some point reading Interview with a Vampire, and I didn't like that book. That book was really violent, and the vampires were cruel, and that is not my thing. But in Twilight, the vampires are sparkly. They sparkle, and they're kind. And I was just enchanted by that world. So, of course, I read all of the Twilight books. And then I had to kind of figure out what other books I could find. And that led me down the rabbit hole of the paranormal romance books, which I have very much enjoyed over the years. And just a funny aside, at one point, it was when Wes and I were in this house that we're in now, and we were still doing in-person angel circles in our home, and we had a group of, I don't know, maybe about 8 people over for an angel circle. So, the energy's beautiful, and I'm channeling messages, and I'm practitioner Laurel. And then maybe after the angel circle and everybody's gone, I go into the bathroom, and to my horror, I had left one of my paranormal romance books on the back of the toilet because back then I read books in the bathroom, and the cover was like the she-devil, or I don't remember what it was, but it was, you could tell this was a paranormal romance with like a werewolf on the cover or something. And I was horrified that here I had been bringing people into this rarefied air of love and light and goodness. And, on the back of the toilet is this witchy werewolf book. And I was so embarrassed for myself. But I no longer hang my head in shame that I love all of them. They're delightful. I don't read as many now as I used to, but it was a genre that absolutely entertained me for a long time. I also have a profound love affair with the Outlander books, and I read them long before the Stars series. So I loved the Outlander books. I still do. And so I also will throw in here about the metaphysical books and the spiritual books because they helped change my life, truly. So back in the 80s when I lived in Los Angeles, I fell in love with the Bodhi bookstore. It was on Melrose, and it was a metaphysical bookstore. And I would go there and get lost for hours. I can still viscerally see, smell, and feel what it is like to walk through their doors. And they no longer exist, but they exist within me. And I would go there and I would look through the different books that were sorted by topics. Topics I didn't even know were options, right? And I would learn and I would buy books and I would come back and read them. And the Bodhi bookstore was absolutely an oasis of light for me. And I still have so many metaphysical books. And I'm going to do an episode at some point of books that are on my bookshelf that I haven't read, but I'm happy that I own. Because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of books I haven't read. But I'm not going to get rid of them because the promise of reading them at some point in my life makes me so happy. And I love owning them. I love that they're there. And I go through the titles on the spines of the books on my bookshelf, and I get so happy. And there are absolutely books that I have read that have changed my life, opened my heart, expanded my perspective of what is possible within myself and in the world. And these days, my husband and I also live in a house filled with books. My husband, as I've shared with you before, is a collector. He collects books. We have a big library of antiquarian metaphysical books, like old theosophical books. I have a beautiful library of metaphysical books. And a total game changer for me was being able to read ebooks on my iPad and on my phone. So I no longer really have any of the paranormal romance books in physical form. I gave those all away. I just don't have enough room on my bookshelves for those, but I can get those out of the library as an ebook. Is that brilliant? Do you know about this? If you don't, you need to. That you can borrow ebooks from the library and just download them to your device. And you don't have to step foot in a library. I do that all the time. And my latest love affair with books, it's twofold. The first one I've shared with you before, which is my love for the community cookbooks that I am presently collecting and that I share with you in other episodes of the podcast that I am in love with. So I'm now kind of obsessed with thrifting and used bookstores and looking for more community cookbooks because each one tells a story of the community of women who put it together. It's like each one, when I hold it in my hands and I look through the recipes, I can feel and sense the story of that community of women, how they were preparing food for their families. I don't know, they are just these brilliant time capsules filled with love. So right now my book collection is growing to include these community cookbooks. And the other love affair that opened for me this year is that of audiobooks. Now, I know that for many of you, you have been listening to audiobooks for a long time. And you might be wondering what took me so long. And my answer to you is, I don't know. But I was talking with my cousins earlier this year, and one of my cousins was sharing his love of audiobooks. And I thought, I wonder if I should give them a try. And I can't remember the first one, but I think it probably was one of the Outlander books as an audiobook, which I had already read, it was an incredible read. But listening to it as an audiobook was a revelation. And one of my dear friends has told me this, that the Outlander audiobooks are amazing. And each one of the books, I think, is between 45 and 50 hours of content. Talk about immersive. And I was sold. And my consumption of audiobooks mostly happens in the car. So when I'm driving, doing my grocery shopping and running my errands, instead of listening to music or a podcast, I put on an audiobook. So I've listened to 2 of the most recent Outlander books as audiobooks and absolutely love them. I think one of my favorite books this year is The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, which I listened to as an audiobook, and I just couldn't stop listening. I was walking around the house with my earphones in because it was so good. And it truly is a different experience than reading to listen to an audiobook. I think I must have thought that an audiobook was just somebody reading the book. But it's really not. It's infused with so much more. I'm listening right now to a book, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And the woman who is reading it, like each character has a different accent, a different voice, a different rhythm, and I'm absolutely enchanted by it. So I think it's so cool that books continue to surprise me. You know, that when I look at 2022, it's been for me a year of storytelling, a year of this podcast, finding the love and the joy in community cookbooks and in audiobooks, that my relationship with books has evolved with me. And it makes me so happy. So here's to our journey with books. Whatever your journey has been. If you have memories of being read to as a child, and those are some of your happy memories. If, like me, you used to escape into the pages of a book. What books are on your nightstand right now, or in your tablet or phone? What are some of your favorite unread books that you hope you read at some point? Each of us has our own relationship with books. And these are just some of my memories and some of my present experiences. The joy of a good book, even if it hasn't been read yet, just having it. Like the joy of the Scholastic book sale, or the Brandeis book fair, or the books that are waiting to be read, or our favorite books that we have read dozens of times. Thank you for the gift of the words to all the authors. And publishers who brought the books to us. So, my beautiful ones, here is to sweet dreams. Here is to an inspired heart. Here's to brighter tomorrows. I send you love. I send you gratitude. And I am so deeply grateful for you. Thank you. We'll talk again soon.